You're good. Welcome to this evening's webinar on the Explicit Mathematics program. I'm running this one with Tony Hatton-Roberts. You can give us a wave, Tony.
Hello,
Hopefully everyone.
welcome everyone.
Tony is, as you can see, her name is Explicit Mathematics Program. We have a special guest, Chris Guy, coming here today. You can see Chris, and she will be sharing a little bit about her story with EMP tonight to kick us off. And tonight's really about answering a lot of questions, but also letting you know some changes we've made in response to some feedback we've had. Also, just give it's kind of a mini PD session as well. We're going to give you some snapshots. One thing that lots of people have asked is, can we see EMP in action? So we've got a little bit of that for you as well tonight. So there's a whole heap of things, and hopefully this is just one of a whole heap of professional development sessions we'll be running. We'll be talking more about that towards the end of today as well. There's already been lots of questions come in. We've kind of planned and organized to respond to a lot of those questions in today's webinar. If anything doesn't get covered tonight that you were hoping was going to get covered, not a problem. Please just send that follow-up email and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Let's jump straight in. I wanted to acknowledge the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, from whose lands I'm sharing today. Pay respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be here today. Tony, whose land are you coming to this webinar?
Well, I usually come through the Yugambeh people, which is the Gold Coast, but I'm just sitting in Cairns at the moment, and I'm very bad at saying the pronunciation, so I won't go there.
Okay, got it. I did click record, didn't I? Yeah, it says stop recording. Great. Okay, let Abby in. Okay, first of all, we just want to say welcome and thank you. There are 6,000 primary schools in Australia, and you are one of 160 early adopters of the EMP. So thank you for having faith in the program enough to give it a crack to jump on board. We are forever grateful for you to be an early adopter and ahead of the curve there. It's also important for us to say that EMP is necessarily complex. This is because we have created a program designed to cover everything that your students need. Therefore, there are lots of moving parts. There are going to be some teething issues at the start, but EMP should not be unnecessarily complex. And that's why I was so grateful for your feedback, because that helps us to make sure it isn't unnecessarily complex and to make it easier and easier to use over time. The final thing we wanted to do in this intro is to have you reflect on, how is EMP going for you now? And this is just a rhetorical question, just something for you to reflect upon. How is it going for you now compared to the very start of the year? We've been chatting to a few schools recently, and inevitably people say that it was extremely hard at the start. There was lots to take in, but even now, a couple of weeks in, it's getting easier. And just imagine how much more familiar with it you're going to be, how much smoother it's going to feel for you and your students by the end of this term, and let alone by the end of this year. So there's just a few things to kind of start us off, a few key points for us to think about. In today's webinar, this is what we're going to be covering. First, an intro to effective implementation. We're then going to look at effective delivery, what it can look like. And we've got a snapshot of Tony doing some EMP teaching that we're going to break down. Tony's then going to take us through some recommendations for effective delivery of the program. And then we're going to talk about some future developments and answer the questions that have been sent in. So that's what we're covering today. Lots to get through, so let's jump straight in. An intro to effective implementation. So this is a snapshot from Chris Guy at Elizabeth Vale Primary School. Chris is a great friend of EMP, and we're very grateful that she's been willing to share some of the early experiences with EMP, just to give you a sense of how one particular school has approached EMP, and you might like to think about the similarities with your context, the differences, and so on. We've got a bunch of kind of prompts for Chris to talk to here, and other than that, we'll just hand over to Chris.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Gotcha.
Yeah. As Ollie said, I'm Chris Guy. I'm an instructional coach with a main focus of professional learning and coaching. I've been doing coaching in various forms for probably about 15 years, which makes me feel very old. I'm based at Elizabeth Vale Primary School, which is a school in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. It's a Category 1 school with an ICSIA of 881, so very complex. Lots of students with complex trauma. About 80% of our kids are school card. We also have 6 intensive English language classes, and about 60% of our kids are English language learners, with a very large cohort of First Nations kids. So before we started EMP, we were using Connecting Maths Concepts, which is a direct instruction program. And that's still being used in our year 3 to 6 classes. And we started using that a few years ago as part of Good to Great Schools. CMC is a great program and it's got lots of positives, but it does have some limitations. And what we were finding, particularly for our younger students, is that it just wasn't quite hitting the mark, and the teachers were finding it quite fiddly. Issues obviously being an American program with some of the language, especially for our younger kids and our kids that are learning English, and also having to switch out for all the lessons to do with currency or measurement. So based on some feedback from the teachers, last year I started looking for something that had that same level of detail in terms of sequencing of content, cumulative and systematic review, and the consistent instructional routines, and that was ideally Australian. Our teachers were already quite familiar with using scripts, so that wasn't really an issue for us. And I think I must have actually manifested EMP into being, because I actually bumped into Tony. I don't know, I think it might have been at Emily Hamford, Tony. And I was chatting to her about CMC. And that's when little birdie told me that there was something in the pipeline and that a program was being created. So I kept a really close eye on that when the information came out about it. Georgia, I'm not sure if she's here tonight. She was going to try and join, but anyway, she's one of our fabulous Year 1 teachers. We attended the information sessions with Ollie, and EMP seemed like it ticked all of those boxes for us. So we decided that this year we were going to trial it in our Year 1 and 2 space. So I predominantly coach the Year 1 and 2 teachers, so I work really closely with those teachers. So getting started with EMP, something that we found really, really super helpful was the implementation guide in the teacher books. So in our week 0, I had allocated 2 90-minute sessions, and we just literally worked through the implementation guide pretty much as it was. And we just basically followed it. So the teachers did the reading, they did the quizzes in partners, and most importantly, we did all of the rehearsals. So I can't emphasize enough how important those rehearsals were, because it actually gave the teachers the opportunity to just get up, partner up, get a lesson up, and actually practice some of those routines and get familiar with the materials. So our teachers are also fairly familiar with rehearsal, because being a step lab school, we do a fair bit of that. So that wasn't anything new to any of our teachers. Providing ongoing support. So I guess the teachers did find it a little bit clunky. Like Ollie said, everything that you start out with is always going to be a bit clunky at first. The teachers did find switching between the daily reviews and using the visualizers and stuff like that a little bit tricky at first, but they're pretty much all over that now. So in terms of ongoing support, our school actually allocates several of our staff meetings each term to learning teams, where the teachers meet together in teams. So we devoted our first couple of learning team meetings just to looking at EMP. We did some more rehearsal, and we actually had lots of time for the teachers to discuss what was working well, what people were still finding a bit tricky, and just to ask any questions and really just support each other. So the teachers were really good about, what did you think of that? I did it this way, have you tried that? And I actually spent a lot of time in those teachers' classes. So apart from formal observations, I do lots of drop-ins. And so I was able to have a look at some of the things that I was seeing that were commonly coming up as teachers finding tricky. and build that into those learning time meetings. We did several extra rehearsals. So we did some rehearsal on signals and some on the error correction procedures, which were the things that I was finding that even though the teachers were used to signals from using DI, the signals are slightly different in EMP. So just making that transition. And I also teach EMP a little bit. One of our teachers only works every second Friday, so I take that lesson on the Fridays that she's not there. So that's given me a really good sense of, you know, how to support the teachers, because I was learning it myself. So how's it going? Well, we feel like it's going great. The feedback from the teachers has been really positive. The scripted number lessons are fantastic. One of the things that the teachers commented on is that the scripts are actually much easier to follow than the CMC books. The way they're formatted actually has made it easier for them to keep their place and not lose their spot in the script. Yeah, there's definitely some things that the kids and the teachers love about EMP. So the connections to the concrete materials, so the TEM frames, the bundling sticks, after actually having to make all the bundling sticks. But the catchy little rhymes, all the instructional routines, like the kids absolutely love up, pencils up. The rhymes that go with the TEMS frames, the gestures that get used. These are all the things that we were really like looking for and that we're missing from CMC basically. And then the MSSP lessons that are not scripted, there's enough guidance there for the teachers that they don't have to start from scratch. And it's really easy for them to have a look and see what they need for the lessons. And use the guidance within those lessons to plan it. So we had some kits made up at the end of last year, and in week 0, we had some fantastic SSOs. I don't know what you call it in other states, but like the student support people that just basically got a hold of the materials list. So I gave them the materials list and they created kits. We have a lot of it we already had, so they've just boxed up nearly all of the materials that the teachers will need for the program. And they've got their own sort of kits of all of the materials. So that's all there for them. That's pretty much it, really.
Amazing. Thanks, Chris. We weren't 100% sure exactly what you were going to say. We sent you those prompts, so thank you so much for that. And lots of positive things, and a few things for us to think about as well. I'm sure there's lots of questions for Chris, but in the interest of time, we won't actually have time for that. What we can ask you to do, though, if you have a question for Chris, just write in the chat "question for Chris" and then write the question. We'll ask you not to like respond to that, Chris, just because that will be very distracting if there's a big back channel discussion going. But we will collate them and we'll see if we can get. I'll jump on the phone for a call with you or something like that, Chris, and we'll write back responses to everyone. Just because we've only got an hour tonight, so we need to move on. One of the things I wanted to really pull out, and thank you so much for that, Chris. Very helpful. One of the things I wanted to pull out from what Chris said there was something she said at the start, the help or the support of the implementation guide. We know that not all schools have had a chance to really work through that in a systematic way as yet. So I just wanted to point out in your teacher lesson book, right from the start, well, you've got this quick start guide for substitute teachers in particular, but that implementation guide starts on page 3 and runs for about to page 17 or so. Chris said she allocated 2 90-minute sessions. That's ideal. You can do 3 one-hour sessions as long as you set aside roughly 2.5 to 3 hours with your staff to work through that systematically. Like Chris said, it's got the quizzes, it's got the instructions, it's got the rehearsal, it's got videos, examples, it's all built in there. So if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, you'll probably find that really gets your teachers a lot more confident and also answers a lot of the questions you may have already had. So thanks for emphasizing that as well, Chris. Fantastic. Now let's move into a bit of a picture of effective delivery. So we were lucky enough to have Tony go to a school a couple of weeks ago. This was a Toowoomba Grammar, and she had a chance to teach a Year 1 class. This is session 2A from Year 1, make and say 2-digit numbers. If anyone's there sitting there with their EMP book, I just thought I'd mention Year 1 book. It's on page 49 if anyone wants to kind of follow along. The total time for this lesson for Tony was 35 minutes. That includes a student entry, the DRQT, the transition to desk, and then the full lesson. So just to give you a sense of, this snapshot comes out of 35 minutes of instruction. For today, I've cut it down to a 4-minute sample just so we can watch a bit of it today. We will send out the full version after this webinar. Did you want to say, is that a hand up, Tony?
Yeah, that's a hand up from me. Just quickly too, these are not my students. They've never seen me before. I just waltzed in and took over this class. So some of the training and their routines and instructional routines, they're not used to mine, but just so you can keep that in mind, that this isn't a well-trained, this is just a random class I've gone in, they've only just started it. So just working with students who weren't as familiar as, possibly if they were my students.
Thanks, Tony. And I think that's a really good point. We wanted to actually show something like that isn't that polished, because for most teachers implementing EMP, you are trying to teach the students how to effectively engage at the same time. So some of the modeling Tony does here, and particularly in the 35-minute clip, is really valuable. Let's jump straight in.
Hands down. Hands down. Hold your elbows. Well, let me see if you did that quickly. Oh, nice job. I think I'm going to give you another point for that. You did so well. When I say eyes up, you'll say track. Eyes up. Track. And you're going to track with your finger. All right, let's try it again. Eyes up. Track. Eyes up. Track. Awesome. We're going to do some math today. So when I ask you to track, we're going to track up here on this whiteboard. Can you do that for me?
Yes.
I think you can. Oh, do we touch our pens? Yes or no?
No.
Do we touch our rubbers? Yes or no?
No.
Ooh, is there anything in our hands? Yes or no?
No.
Hold your elbows. All right, eyes up. What do we say? Eyes up.
Track.
Try it again. Eyes up.
Track.
Okay, let's have a look. We're going to do some counting. We're going to start at 70 and finish at 77. Eyes up.
Track.
So track as I do it. 70, my turn first. 70, 71, 72, my turn first. 73, 74, 75, 76, 77. Eyes up.
Track.
Your turn. Get ready.
1, 2, 3,
Oh, when I point, you say the number. Get ready. 70, 71, 72.
73, 74, 75.
Did such a good job. We're going to count in tens. What do we count in?
Tens.
Eyes up.
Track.
So pointing to the tens numbers, we're going to count in tens from 10 to 90. Get ready. 10,
20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80.
This is 110. When we have a bundling stick, we call this 110. What do we call it?
110.
110. When we have two tens, we call it 20. How do we say it? 20. Can you do a little finger like that for T? We're going to say 20. 20. When it's a T number, it is a tens number. What did it say? Tens number. All right, let's see if we can do this one. What are 3 tens?
30.
Wait for my signal. What are 3 tens?
30.
30.
That's what I did.
What are 4 tens?
40.
40.
That's what I did.
What are 5 tens? Wait for my signal. What are 5 tens?
50.
50. Oh, I like that little finger. What are 6 tens?
60.
What are this? Are you seeing where I'm pointing to? Watch my finger on the screen. This says ones. What does it say?
Ones.
This say tens. What does it say?
10.
Can you find ones on yours? Point to yours. Say ones. What does it say?
1.
Point to tens. Say tens. What does it say?
10.
So that's where we're going to place our bundling sticks today. I'm going to make 43. What number?
43.
I'm going to make 43. 43 has tens and ones. Say after me. 40. Say it. 40 means 4 tens. What does 40 mean?
4
It means 4 tens. You watch how I make 4 tens. Are we ready? Count as I put them on. Watch the screen. 1. All right. Let's see if you can make one. Are we ready? We're going to make 63. What number?
63.
Oh, how many tens in 63? 6. Let's put our tens on. 1, 2. You do yours. So how many tens in 63? 6. How many tens in 63? 6. How many ones in 63? Everybody, how many ones in 63? How many ones in 63? 3. How many ones? 3. All right, put your ones on.
Thanks so much, Tony. I think that's such a good example because, yeah, it's fantastic teaching. Because there was a lot of work you had to do to get those students on, and even that last example there, you know, how many, what it was, ones in 63. It took multiple times, and then you actually had to tell them the answer, have them repeat the answer, and that's exactly what we need to do with those students who are just learning the program at the outset. This is a question, or an opportunity for you to write questions in the chat. Tony might spend about a minute addressing some of them now, but you might find that she's actually addressing some of them in the following section. So, and like I said, anything we don't have time to get to right now, we will get to later. So if there's any questions you have based upon what you saw there, any just comments of things you noticed, feel free to share them, and Tony can have a quick look at that now. Doesn't seem like there's too much popping up.
Someone just asked about the group size, you know, in a class of 28. This class actually had 26. This is not my classroom. As I said, I've just taken over someone's class. Ideally, the classroom setup is not one that I would choose. I would have had a different position of where the students were sitting, where the whiteboard was. I'm not sure if you noticed, but they didn't have a document camera as yet. The school hadn't got one yet. It hadn't delivered. So it was using a webcam on someone's drink bottle. So there are some things that we can do in, you know, just in the organization, the classroom, that can help that. But absolutely, if I had larger classes, I would need to change the position of where my students were, and I would just rearrange my classroom. How come there are no copyrights on the books? There are copyrights on the books. But Ollie, I'll hand to you.
Yeah, copyright is automatically applied in Australia, so that's not something we had to do. Fantastic. All right, so if as more questions come in, Tony, you can choose to address them or not. But let's jump into the next section in the interest of time, because we want to make sure we have time to answer all the questions that were sent in right at the start, and there are plenty of them. Over to you, Tony, for some recommendations about effective delivery.
Yeah, so I just want to really just go really quickly through some tips and tricks. The program has a continuous script. So we just click on, for me, Ollie. A continuous script means it's repeated often. So the key words, the key language are often repeated. So I know for when you're learning like a new program and you've got quite a bit of script to do, a sticky note's really helpful. So because you might just want to put on what are the key words of how you're going to say. So the number is, how many tens, how many ones. But you're then just going to write that on your sticky note, and then maybe put the 4 or 5 numbers that you're going to do, rather than having to have your head down into that script, reading it word for word. You just want to really have the key word for word. So I find that really helpful. It helps you keep pace, because pace is super important for engagement. So with any program where you've got to follow a script, pace is super important, and so is eye contact. So even for me, like to look in that script and then look up, that particularly for little poppets, that's a really, you know, easy time for kids that might lose engagement. So I need to try and make it easy for myself to do that. Error correction, as you saw, is super important. So I can't let them go on without having an error correction, and I'm going to consistently do a lot of error correction to get the responses that I would like to do. Why? Because I need every student to practice. I want to keep my signals tight so that I'm hearing everyone, because if you let students echo off each other with a not a tight signal, what will happen is that you're not going to hear students make error, because they're just copying their louder friends. And we want to use an opportunity of whole class response to actually correct even those little individual kids. And it just means more practice. And instructional routines are super important. So my instructional routines, you know, eyes up track, you know, even I give little points. They're all things that you guys all have in your own teaching repertoire. And I say, bring those to the program, because that's what make those, you know, brings it to life. And they're super important if we want to keep pace. So we get through that lesson in 35 minutes. Just looking at it. So just someone said about the classroom, if they had 29 students. So the way that classroom was set, they had desks on one side and they're all lined up in rows. And then on the other side was the mat. I would actually have had those desks angled. So like more like a chevron. So still in those rows, but angled towards the screen. And then I actually would have had a mat. And this is because those teachers that had space for a mat that had the 24 spaces or 20, 29 spaces. So they're also angled towards the board. I just find that would have been an easier process for me, because even where the lectern was for the document camera was a bit of an awkward position. I felt like I was blocking the view for some of those students. So I would want the students more on an angle and chevron away from that window. So with the extension and differentiation, Ollie and I are going to talk about that a little bit later. So we'll just leave that one for the moment. So just quickly, Ben has sort of said, why is chorusing so important for student learning? We often find 5 kids can answer and the rest will parrot. So number one thing is, if we have a really tight signal, you won't get the parrot, you won't get the echo. The second thing is verbal rehearsal is so important. There is so much research that supports verbal rehearsal in learning. And every time they verbally rehearse, it's an opportunity for practice, and we need practice and repetition, but it's also for you to listen, and then you can see, oh, did someone say, you might have said 43, how many tens of 43? If signal's tight and the kids get used to responding, you'll hear the student who says 3 and you go, oh, listen, there are 4 tens in 43. How many tens in 43? So you're actually getting to that error correction. All right, so I think we can move on. Pace absolutely does matter. You want to avoid a droning where students chorally drone, because that then becomes not learning. That then becomes, I guess, what Ben, you're saying, it's that parroting. So we don't want them to parrot. We want them to say it nice and snappy and be listening. It's also important that what we are asking students, by the time we want them to respond, we keep that really, really close so they actually understand, because for younger students, even older students, or students with auditory processing, if you leave too much of a gap, they've actually forgotten what you've asked. So we want to keep it nice and tight and have the responses nice and tight so we can have the error correction. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but you can bring in a bit of that yes and no. You can tell me yes or no. So you can actually do a little bit of extra checking for understanding within the program if you can keep your pace. You need to set the pace. Kids, you can't let your students set the pace. So when I'm counting or where I want them to count, I'm going to do the rhythm that I would like them to be responding. So the pace that I want them to. If I can do the pace, if I can keep that pace going, I know that with this program, I could get extra repetitions in. And every time they repeat something, rehearse something, verbally rehearse it, it's going to strengthen the recall of the understanding. I use a whip around strategy. What I mean by this is, with very young students, and you could even see in that room, there was a couple of kids missing in action. So there are the kids who weren't always focused during the moment. So what I would add to that routine is, I'm going to have a core response, and then I might then go, whip around. So how many tens in 43, Ollie? How many tens in 43, Christina? How many tens in 43, Kathy? Same question, but I'm forcing my individuals to stay in the learning with me. I'm just going to scroll a little bit. So Ben, you're saying parroting in the context that they're responding without understanding. As the gradual release of the program, we actually are forcing the students to actually do the thinking. So initially I'm doing all the thinking and then they're repeating what I'm saying. We then reduce that and we're sharing the thinking. I'm going to ask them questions and then they're going to respond, but they've got to respond from a thinking position. And in our you do, they're actually having to do the thinking. Hopefully that's answered. Differentiation, we can differentiate at the individual level, even in a whole class. And that's what I meant. If we're doing the program and we actually know our kids really well, and I didn't know those students really well, I could have added, a higher number, or I could have said, oh, let's see if we can keep on counting 100, 110, 120. There's opportunity to add value when you know your students. Or I might have had to slow down and chunk it. So I might have had a lower group, the counting in tens. I got, your turn, and then it was them to repeat. If they couldn't do that, it's like, well, let's do it with me. 10, 20, 30, one more time. 10, 20, 30, your turn. Keep on going. So I'm going to use my responsive teaching. So what are my students saying, doing, responding, to differentiate still at the core of the program. So this next example is where I'm doing, this is the DRQT of this to a lesson. And I'm just going to show how I can up it a bit with counting on hands if I know my students well. So we say you can skip where you need to in those slides, or I'm going to ad lib, because the PowerPoint is not my script. The PowerPoint is giving me an idea of what the learning intent is, but then I can go up or I can go down. So we'll just go to that video quickly. It's a very quick one.
We're going to learn about counting on by using our hands. All right, we're going to use our hands. What we do is we grab a number. Show me how we grab a number. Grab it like this. Okay, so I'm going to grab 3. What time will I do it? I'm just waiting. Just waiting there. Just waiting.
I'll just say that the kids are cropped out here because we didn't have permission from these students. That's why it's a bit of a strange frame.
We're going to learn about counting on by using our hands.
All right, start from the start.
Use our hands. What we do is we grab a number. Show me how we grab a number. Grab it like this. Okay, so I'm going to grab 3. What time will I do it? I'm just waiting. Just waiting there. Just waiting. Oh, I love the way you're sitting. Love the way you're sitting. Fantastic over here. Ruben. What time I grab 3? 3. Grab 3. 3. I can keep on counting. Look how I do it. 3, 4. Count with me. 3, 4. I can even do 2 more. What shall I do? 3, 4, 5. What did I count to? 5. So when I add 2, I can count to 5. All right, we're going to do these ones together. Let's see what our ones are together. We're going to count on 1. We're going to start. Oh, here's a new problem. We're going to get 7. Get ready. 7. Count on 1. 8. You're too good at that. 5. 6. Let's do 4. You won't be able to do this one. Let's see. We're going to grab 12. What are we going to grab? 12. Let's do it. 12. Count on 1. 13. Wait, there's no way we do the next one. Are you ready? I want you to grab 23. What are you going to grab? 23. Let's do it. 23. 24. 23 plus 1 is? 24. You're so good at that. I don't even need to do all the rest because you're so good. We're going to look at some symbols. What are you going to look at? Some symbols.
Probably a couple of questions for you to respond to there, Tony.
Yeah, just having a quick look. We will talk about fast tracking in a moment. So does the chance to delete slides or do extra only apply DRQT? I'll talk about fast tracking in a moment with actual lessons. So it's not about skipping lessons. It is about accelerating, certainly. And there are points where you, again, gradual release. If you're ready, I move those students on quicker because of that. And that might be part of that we do section in a lesson that you certainly could. Oh, yes, teacher enthusiasm. Yes, of course it does. You bring the energy. Kids love doing it if you like doing it. You know, there are some programs where that people might rename them, and that's because it's a teacher who needs to bring the enthusiasm. So how do you deliver the program when you're teaching more than one grade in the one math class? So we're going to talk about composites a bit later. So we would just leave that one, but thank you. All right, so the fast tracking when and when not to. So remember, our evidence supports everything that we know about explicit teaching and ensuring that students can learn is that it supports whole class teaching. But there are certainly times, and I work in a school at mastery schools, we have students who are 6, 5, 4 years below, and they don't benefit from whole class teaching. And we need to have a strict intervention program going for those students. But for most classes, yes, we've definitely got a spread. What we want to say is that explicit teaching, just like this is Pamela Snow's comment. She said explicit teaching of alphabetic decoding skills is helpful for all children, harmful for none, but absolutely crucial for some. And I guess our attitude in our team is that we feel the same about number and foundational number in mathematics. We feel that foundational number skills is helpful for all children. It's harmful to none and is going to be absolutely crucial for some students to have success in mathematics. And we know from the data, the Australian-wide data, that we've actually got some problems with our mathematics across the whole country. We need to be data driven. So we should be expecting our students to get 85% mastery in their independent work, because that way that gives us the feedback that our students were involved in the DRQT, they were involved in the lesson, that we've gradually released that responsibility. So we are expecting 85%. Anything below that, we need to start looking at, oh, do I need to do more error correction? Am I missing students? Do I need to do more whip around for some individual students? We need to be careful of what we call an illusion of fluency, where sometimes as teachers, we feel a bit driven by those couple of extension students that we normally would have to cater for differently, but we feel a bit driven by those extension students in an explicit lesson. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't be driven by those. Know that it's not going to harm them to do some extra practice. If we keep the pace and punchy, they'll enjoy it. But we know that all our kids will benefit. If we skip too fast or fast track, for the minority, we're going to have a whole bunch of kids that we possibly can drop off, very similar to what's happened in reading. Okay, fluency practice. I know this is a part of the program that I've had many questions about and the team have had questions about. So what happens when students can't do the fluency? I think my initial thing is I would always reflect on, how did I do the daily review? We don't want to take shortcuts. Those adding, holding a number and counting on, they are all the underpinning of adding 1 and adding 2. Like, that's why we can't take, be careful not to shortcut those parts. And the initial repeated oral practice is necessary to support some of our lower students. It's the whip around. I'm going to make sure I make my whip around kids do those things in DRQT. And also I keep my pace so I can do actually extra repetitions even within the time frame. The more they do it, the more they will remember it. We know that fluency matters. What I will do though is I can support students because they might be new to fluency practice, and particularly in year 1 and 2, they haven't done our programs before. So we do some whole class oral practice. So that would where the students would have their fluent, we would have done it on the mat. We've done our oral practice of new facts. We've now got our worksheet. But before we even start our 2 minutes, I'm going to get the kids to actually do orally. Let's go through these together. 3 and 1 is 4. 4 and 2 is 6. And actually get the kids to say it. And we might do that for 2 lines, maybe 3 lines, but we're just doing the initial ones as an extra oral practice. And we might even be giving the students and getting them. What you'll see is they slowly do start developing and picking up their skills in fluency if they're unfamiliar. So whip around, Ben, as I said before, whip around is where I'm going to add extra individual turns and lots of them. I'm not picking non-volunteers paddle pop sticks. So that's not my strategy. I'm doing a daily review. So I want it snappy and fast. I'm going to throw in extra individual turns, making sure that every one of those students, particularly those lower ones, are getting an opportunity, and making sure that I can see, did they say it? Because you have the odd one, particularly preppy students, they might not have said it in the choral. So I'm going, so 3 and 1, everyone, let's do it. 3 and 1 is 4, 3 and 1 is 4. Everyone, what's 3 and 1? Ben, what's 3 and 1? Jody, what's 3 and 1? Christy, what's 3 and 1? That's a whip around. I'm going to be really, really quick and just repeat. We do know, though, that some students have actually really had some struggles, and that's why we created the scaffolded fluency routine. It's come from evidence-based. So this fluency routine is reducing the set size, and we've produced this from evidence. It wasn't just, we decided, hey, let's do it like this. We looked at the research, and the evidence suggests this is the best way to support those students who aren't making that progress. So we reduced the set size for the students, and you have a link in your implementation. You have the link for the scaffolded fluency routine, and it's basically a look, cover, write, check. We actually give the student the fact, they read it, so they actually have to verbally rehearse it. They then write it, they then cover it, and then they write it again. But they're doing that practice while the other students are doing in their 2 minutes. We still only want 2 minutes. We don't want students to not like fluency, so we don't want to extend it to 5 minutes. We just want to keep it 2 minutes. But there'll be a number of students who have to do their 2 minutes will be the scaffolded routine. The fact support, just that document that was for, so what that little support there, we use that for regular lessons. It's not meant to be used in the fluency routine. It's for students when they're doing their lessons that they might need an extra scaffold. Thanks, Ollie.
Right. Thanks for your question, Nicola. We'll address that in a moment. Thank you, Tony. A great overview of some of the key things that it's helpful for teachers to keep in mind during delivery. We're now going to talk a little bit about, we're going to respond to all those questions that have been asked and talk a little bit about in response to that, future developments at EMP. So we can just go through these one by one. How to navigate DRQTs easily, and this is a question that you asked just here, Nicola. We're happy to share that we've actually just made a small edit to these reviews. So you'll see, and again, a reminder that these can be viewed so that they look like a slideshow. If you go File, actually View, into full screen. This will be like a slideshow. I can use my arrow keys to move around, but you can see you can jump straight to the block that you're interested in, block 14, straight to the lesson you want to, or the session you want to do, 14C, for example, and then progress with your arrow keys. You'll notice that there's now, or there will be from block 11 onwards, a return to home button. So you can click that at any point. That will take you straight back to the menu. So hopefully people won't feel that this is necessary for this to be kind of divided up, because you can literally just get to anywhere you want super quick, get back to the start really quickly. So that's hopefully that's helpful in response to the question that people had on that one. Can you show us a slideshow? Yes, you can. I just showed you how to do that. It will be a little bit different in each PDF viewer that you use, but that's how you do it in preview. And in the implementation guide, in those pages 3 to 17, work through that. And there's a video of me showing you how to do that in a number of different systems. How to edit the DRQTs as they aren't slides. There isn't a way to actively edit them. This is actually on purpose. It's because we have designed this program so carefully that everything builds minutely into the next skill. And so we actually didn't want schools to have the ability to change things on a slide, because often, and this has happened in other programs, you might take things out that it's impossible for you to know why it might be there. And so it's really crucial that we keep it that way. What you can do is you can skip slides, and that's what we really recommend you do, if you feel like your students are absolutely mastering it. But again, yeah, that's for you and your teacher professional judgment. Jump in at any point, Tony, if you have anything to add here. Question about DRQTs as PowerPoints. I actually want to show you why they come as a PDF. Lots of people think it's because it's a copyright issue or an intellectual property issue. That is not the main reason at all. It's actually because we create the daily reviews in a really special way, which is part of why we've been able to make the EMP so effective. So this is an example of behind the scenes of what creation of daily reviews looks like. This little bit of code here creates these two slides. I don't need to go into heaps of detail, but essentially you can see that a small amount of code can produce these slides. And what that means is that we've actually got a massive spreadsheet. I'm going to show you a copy of this, and this is what creates the daily reviews. So each row represents a daily review. As you can see, this is daily review number 1. Each of these columns represents a skill, and this is the code that produces the slides for that skill. So we can go down and we can make a small edit in this code, and that's going to propagate through all the slides in that daily review. What this enables us to do as a program is make small tweaks and changes based upon information that we're getting from schools about how well students are learning, what they're struggling with, and so on. We can make really quick changes that change the whole sequence of slides for students as needed. It also means, for example, adding that return to home button can be done really quickly and easily. So for that reason, it's actually completely necessary that we produce them in PDFs, because the language that you use to do this coding is called LaTeX, and that creates PDFs. So hopefully that little kind of view behind the scenes helps people to understand why the slides are like that and why they're set up in the way they are. Okay, just trying to bring everyone back. There we go. Can the student workbook be digital to make it easier to show students? This is a similar response to what we were just talking about previously. One of the things to keep in mind is that a key thing for you to do as a teacher is to be modeling what you want your students to be doing clearly for them. So that means you actually writing on a book under a visualizer, also known as a document camera. Here's an image of what we mean when we say visualizer in the resources. You modeling your handwriting, you modeling using the manipulatives for students is absolutely crucial, and so that they can see exactly what you're doing with your hands and how you're doing that. That's why we've chosen not to provide the workbooks in a digital format. Can we include a link with any QR codes? Sometimes we don't want to use the contact the phone to access the content? Yes, and we've actually got Verity, our admin person, who's here today. Hi, Verity. She's on this project right now, and we'll be providing you that list of links to accompany QR codes soon. All links on some website other than Google Drive. Where this is an issue, especially for Queensland schools where Google is blocked, people are having to use hotspot and things like that. Verity and I had a meeting with a provider on Tuesday. We will be transitioning to a non-Google Drive option very soon. We're doing that as quickly as possible, and you'll get an email with your login details and login link as soon as that's up. And like I said, we're working on that as quickly as we can. Lesson structure and sequencing. Lesson and DRQT link. So we have comments. We thought it'd be helpful for people to know that we've had conflicting reports from schools. So some schools say content is too long. Other schools say it's perfect. So for us as a program, that's hard for us to judge, and we don't want to make changes based upon any single school. That being said, we feel that, and what we've seen in the schools that we've worked with and worked closely with so far, is it gets much quicker. As you saw that example from Tony, even with the new class, she was able to get through the DRQT and a full lesson in 35 minutes. So we hope that for schools, it will become quicker over time and be appropriate. That being said, we are reviewing DRQT length and some changes been made, including increasing spacing for some skills from block 11 onwards. Like we said, the way that we create those DRQTs and are able to upload them to you so that you have access to them straight away is part of the strength of the program, because we can be responsive in that way. Over to you, Tony.
Yeah, so the MSSP, not reviewing data review. We could have attached them to the end of a data review, but it's a minor part of the foundational cumulative math that students in P2 need to cover. 70%, 85% is really around number and foundational skills. So we've got the MSSP review there for you. It's much shorter. It can take, sometimes it's like 6 to 8 minutes. We've made it there on purpose, and it can be used at any time. So if you wanted to use it multiple times, you're quite welcome to do that. It's also something that I know that for most schools, because we're all teachers here, we are a bunch of teachers making programs because of our teaching. But what we do know is that most schools have a nice 2-hour block and go, that's literacy. But very few schools have 1-hour block of numeracy or mathematics because of other conflicting subject areas or specialists. So we've made it so that the MSP, you can separate it. It doesn't have to be done just before the MSSP lesson. It could be done before. They just go out to lunch and they come back. The purpose of the data review is to retrieve information consistently, but it's not as much as what you would absolutely need for foundational number skills that we know leads to good mathematics.
Thanks. And I'll just respond to Robin's question, and thanks for your comment there, Sharon. Yes, it is a developing program 100%, and that's the intention of the EMP. It will always be a developing data program, because we will always be responding to data, and that's a crucial part of our philosophy. Tony.
Yeah, so repetition lesson scripts, how to adapt it. Remember, we are responsive teachers. So yes, we've got a script, and yes, you've got a lesson plan, but it's a gradual release of responsibility. So if you're picking up data from your students, so their responses, 100%, their mastery in their lessons, you can go through those lessons, even the we do parts, quicker than what the program says, or you might need to do more rehearsal. So it's, if you know the script, you know the learning intent, you actually can then make those responsive changes on the run, a little bit like I did in that DRQT. I could see the kids had it. We just moved on.
Right, lessons needing more resources than those listed. So yeah, we've noticed that this is primarily an issue in the MSSP lessons, and that's because it was an oversight for us not to have a note at the top of those lessons in the same way as we do for the other lessons. We apologize for that oversight. We've actually just had Martin Ravindran, who's written all our MSSP lessons, go back through all the lessons. He's compiled a big list for you of every lesson and the resources required for it. He's also on the job right now of making some of those resources for you, like the images of polygons and things like that. And that's going to be, we'll send a list out to you tomorrow, and we'll be sending the resources to you very soon as well. Again, thank you for all this feedback. It helps us to improve the program. Spiral bound student book can be problematic. Some children pull off the spiral. Yes, apologies for that. We understand that a hard bound back is stronger. However, it's absolutely crucial for the book to be open completely flat so students can place their manipulators on it. If it wasn't a spiral bound back, they'd be trying to put blocks on it and be flipping over. It'd be a disaster. So that was a necessary evil there. Will there be another delivery resource later in the year? Yes, you have already paid for the full year of resources. You will get them. They will come around week 18 for the second half of the year. List of resources should be at the top of each lesson. Yes. We've mentioned that. I've covered that in a little bit. What the question here is, what's the best format? Like if if you have suggestions for that, shoot us an email. We'll be building it into the next version of the book rather than, just a document that we're tacking on. So please, if you have any suggestions, please email them through. Assessment and reporting, Tony.
Yeah, so I think just be careful. The summative assessment has the 5-point scale. The formative assessments don't, but for the assessment that you need to report from, the summative has the 5-point scale. And that is in the spreadsheet that you're provided when you bought the assessment program section. Differentiation assessments. Look, best practice for me, I still want those students attempting parts of the assessment. So what I might do, for really low performing, I might actually highlight the ones I want them to go to first because I want them to have that stamina. But if I'm going through the script of this assessment, I'm going to get those kids to do it with me. Those kids are going to be at the front of the classroom. I might have an AT working with them, but I really want them to do as much as possible. Why? Because it gives me data. I know how I can support those students later.
Cool. That person is muted now. Tony, a bit more from you.
Yes. So this is where someone has done an early formative assessment. They did it early and their class got 100%. And could the initial foundation assessment have a guide to where to start a cohort? I would suggest not to skip it, but you certainly, if the data is telling you can accelerate, then it can be a point of acceleration. So you can use a formative test to fast track if you actually know that your students have that. We just want to be really careful that we don't skip parts because math is cumulative and there'll be small sections that you think, hey, I think my kids have got this, but if they don't have it, they're going to have trouble later with mathematics. So there are some things that you may feel that we're really drumming, but we're drumming for a purpose because they're the things we know kids have missed and they end up having trouble in year 3 and year 4 and year 5 because they haven't got those skills down.
Definitely. To add to that, if you look at a specific lesson, like a really tricky lesson, like the first lesson we have on fractions, the amount of for students to understand fractions is immensely cognitively demanding. So what we've actually done, we've written a really detailed list of all the prerequisite skills and we've sequenced them through the program. So you might find a few lessons before fractions or a few weeks before fractions, there's stuff popping up in daily reviews that's like little bits of knowledge and you're like, I don't understand, we haven't covered this yet, what's this all about? It's because it's systematically placed there. So when kids get to that fractions lesson, they have all the prior knowledge required and they can actually tackle those trickier fractions concepts. So that just adds to what Tony was saying there as well. Tony.
Reversing numbers. Do we count it as incorrect? Depend on the learning intent. If the learning intent of the assessment was, can they write the number 7 and they write it reversed, they can't do it. So that is actually a problem. But if in any other mathematics, in any answers, they reverse the number, no, that's not incorrect.
Yeah, so that's 100% Tony. The thing we'd add to that is that in the bridging resources or in foundation, you're going to have that anyway, but in 1 and 2 bridging resources, you can go back and use the resources on numeral formation if you're finding that reversals are a big issue. And we would definitely encourage you to do that if that's consistently an issue in your classroom. This is me. Teachers worry about bridging tasks, bridging taking so long that summative deadlines arrive. What do we do? So basically the program is designed, and for those who haven't come across the bridging resources, they're resources designed for if you're starting in year 1 and 2 and those kids haven't come through EMP so far. And yeah, there's a test you do at the start of the year. It's all in the book. And then you let us know if you need the resources, we send them to you. The EMP is designed to move students through the curriculum as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, however, there's only so fast that you can go based upon the level of prior knowledge of your learners. Therefore, if the testing suggests that you should be using the bridging resources and you're finding that, moving through them is going to set you back, that's actually totally fine because what you're trying to do is just move them, get them as successful as they can be in that summative assessment. So just run the summative assessment at the same time. It will give you an accurate assessment of where they are in relation to the expected grade level. It might be a little bit behind, but we can almost guarantee that they will be further ahead than if you had have not done the bridging, because then they probably wouldn't have been ready for the content at all. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Tony.
No, I think that's perfect. I mean, that's exactly what we need to do.
Great. Chris has a question. Do you want to have a look at that one, Tony?
Yeah, I do. So would you recommend immediately correcting numeral reversals and DRQT? Absolutely. in any sort of explicit, we need our kids in that daily review, sort of rapid review environment, that the last thing the student hears or sees is the correct model. So I'm absolutely going to fix their reversals. I'm actually going to show the model. I'm going to draw it on their board. They're going to rub theirs out because I have a whiteboard, and they can quickly just copy mine for it. If we don't correct it, they just keep practicing error.
One for you, Tony.
So students that didn't score well in the fluency because they haven't had the prior practice, and they feel that that's the only thing holding them back, the part of year one that's holding them back before they can move on to year two or keep working on the bridging. Well, what I would say is do the bridging, because the fluency matters. Having those basic number facts to 10 are absolutely imperative for the year two program. The very first lesson relies on it. So I would absolutely, get the pace going, but definitely need to work on doing that bridging course before you move on to the year two.
Tony.
Okay, so how do we support students who are struggling in fluency? I think I covered that before. So having the extra oral practice, making sure we get them to say it back. So I don't think there's more. If you I think this is a school-based decision, but I would see no reason why you'd want to hold a class back because the next door class isn't moving as fast through that, through the bridging. I would just let them go, because you're guided by that, those kids.
Okay, extending early finishes and high flyers. We must say this is one of the most common things we've got from schools. Basically, this program is supporting our struggling learners and our standard learners exceptionally well. Our high flyers are not being as stimulated or as engaged as would be ideal. We recognise that. It has been primarily the reason for existence of the EMP to make sure every student achieves grade level. So we'll firstly say, we're not ashamed of that as our goal, and we feel like EMP is achieving that, which is something we're incredibly proud of. That being said, we also want to make teachers' lives easy, and we want to provide a comprehensive program. So we're actually in the process right now of hiring someone to write specific enrichment activities to go with every single lesson. Now, that's not something that's going to be finished for the first half of the year's lesson. It's going to take a little while, but we just want to let you know that we're responding to that request from schools and that feedback from schools. And we're really excited to have some resources in your hands, definitely next year, potentially before that. In addition to that, we hope that the EMP has been saving you planning time so far, which would mean that you would have more time anyway to cater for those high flyers, who we expect would be high flyers in your class anyway. Regardless of what you're doing, you'd have to be catering to them anyway. Is there a suggested scope and sequence for composite classes if streaming is not possible in a small school? This is a huge challenge. Essentially, unfortunately, there's no kind of composite scope and sequence. You need to make a decision. You need to have a look at the scopes and sequences for different years, and you have to pick a year level. If there's some way to semi-stream, we would encourage that if possible. But yeah, this is just a really tricky thing. We'll say that we have a large number of schools right now with composite classes who have made this decision and who are working in this way. So it will be really great as we move through this year to have more and more experience from those schools. That will enable us to better cater for them, make tweaks as necessary if we can, but also to provide advice to schools. None of our trial schools had composite classes. So that will furnish us with better knowledge of supporting schools with composite classes, and we will be conveying that knowledge as it comes to light. Ben had a question. Yeah. So catch up or top up is a couple of things. Basically, you're doing those formative assessments on a regular basis. They will be telling you what your students are struggling with, if anything. That's when a top-up session comes in. You can go back and redo a lesson. You can do a couple of daily reviews. You can do anything you think can target those weaknesses. The reason why it's catch up or top up is because some schools might feel like their students are doing really well. We would encourage you to do some more rich tasks and more problem-solving kind of work, stretch your students, and enrichment kind of work. There are also buffers, because there's sports carnivals, there's heaps of disruptions in school. It just means that we wanted to make sure schools didn't feel stressed because they were behind and they could keep up with the program. Maddie, just email admin@explicitmathematicsprogram.com and we can send you those resources. Thanks, Maddie. Tony.
Okay, assisting students who are at 6 months behind. Again, there's opportunities to continually pull these students up in a whip around, so continually assist them. But also I'm going to have a seating plan for those kids. They're the kids I go quickly first to when we start something, when we're doing our WeDo. I'm going to scaffold them the same as I would probably any other time. I'm going to keep pulling those kids along. When they get to their I do, so we're doing that independent, I know that there's probably 4 kids that I'm going to go straight to them. It's still a we do with them. So we're going to keep doing those. But what those kids really need is to make sure that they're involved in that choral, that they're doing, we're making sure they're not opting out. Hopefully that's answered. I'm just looking at a couple of questions, Ollie.
Yeah.
So the scaffold of fluency, yeah, they're for the students who really you've had a go at that, bringing them in. They're unfamiliar, so we've kept them in for a little while. We've done whole class oral, even with the worksheet before we do a 2 minutes. So we've added a couple of extra scaffolds before we then said, you know what, these students really are not able to do the fluency program. They're not making any gains or improving in their fluency. So they're that lower percentage of the kids that you think actually they just need to go on the scaffolded program, while the other students are doing their normal fluency routine.
I answer this one while Tony's reviewing anything else. Not a lot of time for exploration, open-ended tasks or problem solving. Can we build that in? 100%. That's the idea of that catch-up or top-up time. So hopefully I covered that already. This is the final page, I will say, before some notes on PD. Concern in the daily review, children repeat answers after the teacher without truly understanding. Is this time or yeah? So this is what we were talking about before. You will find over time that gradual release of responsibility is built in. Perhaps the first time a concept is introduced, it will be repeated, a repetition, but that will be turned into retrieval and understanding later on. Tony.
Absolutely. Look, I'm going to, 2 things here. Can we incorporate more multisensory hands-on movement? I'm going to separate that from your EDI strategies. We've got to be careful. So we've put some hands-on things on there because we know they're absolutely necessary. And to keep instructional routines, I will add things like, eyes up, and the kids have to track and put their finger up because they're engagement things that I know to keep them engaged. I want you to put a lens on, be careful if you're adding extra multisensory, or they're doing a dance, or they're standing up and sitting down, because those things can actually impede the learning. They actually become a distractor to what we actually want them focused on. So I'm probably going to say be careful with adding too much just movement for the sake of it, for thinking that it's an engagement. If we keep our pace well and we sort of have the enthusiasm, I don't think it needs to have extra things. When it comes to EDI strategies, and for people who don't know that, so those strategies we know are really good engagement norms. Absolutely, I think in an explicit lesson you could do a think, pair, share. I add heaps of little checking for understanding extra things when I'm doing, even when I'm saying, does 4 tens have 10s? Yes or no? Yes. Like, I'm going to add those things because engagement is number one. If you don't have attention, students aren't going to learn anything. So absolutely add those strategies that work for focus and student engagement. Yeah, I think I answered that. That general engagement, it's the number one thing, is to have students engage while we're doing this.
Yeah, great. So Ritu says, with the implementation program, staff feel there is no time for exceeding these students as the script and lesson delivery takes up time. Please advise. 2 things. Hopefully the script and lesson delivery will take up less time over time. Secondly, like we said, we're working on those resources and we'll hopefully have them to you as soon as possible. And they will be designed in such a way that they're designed to be used in conjunction with the program and easy to use. And until then, please reach out. Please do your best and reach out if for any additional support there. Tony, you can read that next one while I jump onto this next page. Okay, question is, do you offer any PD or advice for implementation? Yes. Due to popular demand, we will be running some professional development. Tony and I have managed to find 4 dates in the next, 4 months or so where we can actually get together and run some PD together. These are the dates. We will be sending out the detailed info very soon. We have already got host schools for at least 3 of these locations, so that's really exciting. This is not going to be expensive PD. It's where we're running it basically cost price just to be able to cover our flights to get there, because we're not trying to make money out of this PD. That's never been the intention of the EMP. Our goal is to support schools as best as we can. Tony, was there anything else you wanted to respond to there?
No, the kindergarten teacher's asking about patterns and pattern cores, and that they are in the program. So it might not be in the same scope and sequence schedule that you're used to, but it is covered within the program. So whatever system we've looked at, we've tried to put everything in, not tried, we have put everything in that's covered in all of those systems. So absolutely it will be there. It just might not be in the schedule that you've seen previously.
100%. And Mundaring Primary School, yes, we are on track for Year 3 in 2026. We are a few minutes over. My watch tells me I've been having a stressful day. It's 8:36 p.m. Thank you so much for coming along. We really appreciate it. Thanks for that, Lisa. Please shoot us an email. We'd love to chat to you about potentially hosting in Brisbane. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, as we said, thank you so much for being early adopters of the EMP. You are 160 schools amongst 6,000, and we really appreciate you having the faith in the program. Hopefully, you're already having a sense that your students are benefiting from it. And yeah, I know Tony's got an engagement she has to run to. I've got something else now. But any other questions, please send them through via email. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening.